Yeah, cool, thanks. Yeah, so welcome. Hopefully you all picked up with the auction downstairs. It was a great event for a good cause. As he mentioned, so I tried to give this talk at CCC with FX. We had a dual presentation, but I'm currently in the Air Force and I work in the intelligence community. So I was really glad to be able to present this in some sort of forum. But I think that actually makes it a little more relevant. So I hope to say during this talk some things that anger a few people maybe into debate, not into personal objections, right, but into a good debate, but as well as present a second side of the story, or at least my opinion, because I have a unique perspective, right? I don't speak for anybody but myself, but I've lived in Germany for the last 3 years. I work here. I'm happy as part of the community. I consider myself a hacker, but I also work in the US intelligence community through the Air Force, so interesting to see some of this stuff. But my stance, and one of the things I was actually surprised it got denied, is that privacy is great for security, and that privacy is important for us. So hopefully won't be too many adverse reactions to this. So this is the overview of the talk to try to keep me from going off on tangents. I do have a built-in rant part, so I'll rant a little bit on the stuff that I've seen that's made it uncomfortable for me in Germany currently, and some of the things that bother me. And then we'll get into the privacy versus security argument and then sort of my proposed solution. So just on the CYA aspect, I do work for the government, but I don't represent the government here. It is my own opinions. I don't represent anybody else but myself, right? So that's always fun. So background about myself, name's Robert Lee, US Air Force Cyberspace Operations Officer. If FX was here with me, I'd have to be drinking every time I say cyber. I'm a PhD student, not students, guess I should check my own slides, at King's College in London, looking into control system cybersecurity, saying why basically it's not good for anybody to be attacking critical infrastructure. And then I'm an adjunct lecturer at Utica College, teaching digital forensics. So I have accepted biases, and this is one of the things I want to throw up first, right? So I said all these things, so what does that mean to my perspective? Well, my accepted biases is, one, I'm in the military, so I like some sort of structure, some sort of hierarchy, or at least I accept it by being there. And I have some sort of desired understanding of rules and oaths. So one of the first questions that could get out that I'll preempt is the discussion of, Snowden leaks, information like that. How do you feel about it? Well, I actually am saying privacy is important, but not coming out and saying, hey, everything that's happened is great and wonderful, or how it's been approached is great and wonderful. But I actually don't have any problem with these individuals either. Even though I like oaths, even though I don't support what was done, at least how it was done, I think there's really good value in the debate. I think there's really good value for us to learn from. So that's an accepted biases. Another accepted biases for me is that I have a view and appreciation of intel missions. So working in the US intelligence community, I would have to completely get out if I did not agree that there was some value there. I think targeted intelligence is a position that the states take for some aspect of diplomacy. It works. Targeted intelligence, doing cool things in the intelligence community, there's some value to it, right? I'm not trying to convince you, wouldn't do that, especially in this crowd. I'm just saying my accepted biases. I also have, I actually really like EFF, and my view on EFF is probably different than most. I support the organization even when I disagree with it. I think they present a really good voice in the community and a good counter. So going in the intelligence community, working in things, doing things that are great and wonderful, I want to be countered. I don't really care if I agree or not. I think a secondary voice that is an opposition voice generates good debate and good discussion and drives everyone in a better direction. So I actually really do appreciate EFF's stance with the privacy leaks, with mass surveillance, which I actually disagree with. Not them, but mass surveillance, which we'll talk about later. But even when I don't agree with their viewpoints, I really appreciate them as an organization. And then I'm a PhD student as well as teaching at university, so I value sources and data points. And we'll talk about this a little bit throughout the talk, but in general, I'm very biased towards that. I might appreciate valid sources more than the normal community would. So my talk's bottom line up front, just for people that I'm going to lose or whatnot, it's simply saying the people involved in the intelligence community that are doing things that you may or may not agree with, I don't think they're bad people. Even when I don't agree with non-technical leadership saying, hey, from a national perspective, not just with the US, but in general, national perspective of Congress or government leaders or whoever, even when I think they make wrong decisions, I don't think they're bad people. Generally speaking, I mentioned this last year, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I really want to screw everyone over today. Like, I want to be an ass today. That's my job. Well, that's usually not what happens. They're trying to make the world a better place. They're trying to do something positive. So the first thing I would say throughout my talk is, I think the people themselves are probably good. It's been pretty uncomfortable for me since the leaks, working here in Germany, go up in uniform. It's been a very different stance with the public than it used to be. I really love living in Germany, but I've gotten a lot of sort of backlash for being a military member here. I go now in uniform somewhere and I'm looked at differently, or people approach me differently, or I've been told a number of times that I should get out of the country. Like, I'm a huge privacy supporter, but just by virtue of being in the military, not even, I'm actually in the Air Force, not the NSA, but here all the talk is like, oh, well, military, American, NSA, leave the country. But even the people I know in the NSA, even the people I know in the intelligence community, they're really good people, and we should remove that from the discussion, right? It's not the people. And for me, it's also not about an agency or a specific group. It's not about the NSA. If you really think that the US government's the only ones doing things, you're really not paying attention to the discussion that's been going on for the last 20 years, not just since Snowden leaked some information. There's a lot of governments doing a lot of crazy things. If you went to Rodrigo's talk and he's talking about the underlying architecture and hardware and the cool things that can be done, if people know that things can be done, there's probably someone researching somewhere what other badness can be done with that as well. So that's another point in my talk. And also, I want to say that, again, not all surveillance and not all intelligence is bad. I think there's a certain stance the public has to come to of what is our accepted value on that. But my biases, my understanding is that not all of it's bad. I am saying, though, and I am taking a stance on saying mass surveillance is both ineffective and wrong. It doesn't get you anywhere. It's actually really bad for the analysts, which I'll talk about later. I am saying that untargeted surveillance is absolutely wrong. And I am saying that it's not a privacy or security debate, that debate of privacy or security is absolutely incorrect. It's privacy and security, which we'll go through later. So that's just what we're going to run through, right? So my rant is going to be on the current state of the leaks, as well as the sourcing and fear and uncertainty and doubt that comes with it, and then sort of that aspect of hype loses outside of our community. So our community, we understand things, we think in technical, we're thinking, there's a lot of passion behind this. Go ask your normal person about the information. You'll get a much different view. I was at a store in the US on a trip back for a conference, and I just wanted to get a data point, a reference to say, how many people are talking about this? So I asked the guy, I was like, so you've heard about, at a clothing store, I said, you've heard about the recent leaks news and stuff, right? And he's like, well, no, or maybe I did. I remember something about this, and there was some privacy discussions. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, okay, I guess it's made it outside of our community in a big way. Even the clothing guy, is hearing about it. And he's like, yeah, something about like Bradley or Chelsea Manning. I'm like, yeah, that was a while ago. We're up to a whole nother discussion point now. But there was a lot of people that aren't outside of that aren't in our community that haven't grappled with this discussion yet. And when we build up hype, we lose those people more than get them. So what I want to say about the current state of the leaks is there's great debate. So whether you agree with it or not, whether you agree with things being leaked or not, what a great discussion point about the aspect of transparency and surveillance and what could be done and what should be done by governments. Plenty of an opportunity, though, for other people to push their own agendas and for other people to push their own conspiracy theories. One of my rants is absolutely, I'm tired of seeing people make the NSA or other people the boogeyman. You lose value. If you start not sourcing information, if you start just blaming everything on entities, then we drive the focus, instead of being sort of outward looking and seeing what is possible and really fixing issues, we drive the focus into just being conspiracy theorists. Just because you call yourself an independent journalist doesn't make you one. I've seen some people come out that were actually activists that had no experience in journalism, that all of a sudden they had a story with no sourcing or no information, and they wanted to submit it to a paper, and because it's privacy themed or Snowden themed, now it's a good piece to have in a magazine or a paper, and they start labeling themselves as independent journalists. So I think that's wrong, and I think that's bad, specifically because you're presenting information in a wrong way. So without even sourcing, without even facts to back up your argument, you're saying, oh yeah, reader that doesn't know me, I want you to know that I'm an unbiased, independent journalist trying to capture the whole story. Well, that's not true. That's not what you're doing. You're misleading the reader. And I think that we have enough to focus on, and we have enough good facts and enough good stuff to say something's wrong without trying to mislead the people that read these stories. But there is value in being an activist. So also, polls are misleading. I'm tired of seeing like, oh, 57% of Americans or 3% of the Germans are absolutely seeing this as wrong. Okay. If any of you haven't done the research on the polls, if you haven't seen where they're getting those values, they're absolutely worthless. They go and they poll a group of people. They already know what's going to be one way, and they present that numbers out to people. So it's just something to be aware of. But again, there's a lot of good discussions to have. So this is what I would describe as single-sourced arguments. You get all of these stories that come out, and Reuters and Fox and CNN and the Zeit, and everyone comes out and sources this information and says, yes, we have all these great facts about this community. And then you track it back about these leaks or these great things being done, and it's a single source debate from someone saying, well, I can't show you the information, but I've heard from from an anonymous source deep inside the intelligence agency that this is the information. Well, that's a crap argument, because what happens is you get stuff like this. So you can't read it as well, but what I'll say about it is, top page, front page on Reddit, we have this one saying, NSA now bugging 320 officials in place of Merkel, including most trusted people in Merkel's organization. This is horrible. So you read the article. It's actually a Bild am Sonntag article, so probably not the best reference points, probably not the best data point in Germany. It's pretty much a tabloid. But they're saying, yes, it's a new non-Snowden NSA leaker has come forward, and here's the information. But forget about it being Bild am Sonntag. What I like is as it goes down, and they say, isn't this a German tabloid? And they say, oh yeah, well, will we all become African was like the last article that they published. But the person says, yeah, right, DW and Reuters both came out and said this was also true. They also sourced this information. And then a guy comes out the bottom and says, yeah, but if you look, they both quote Bild am Sonntag. So we see this over and over in the organization, over and over in the news media, where you get one person, one organization saying something, and then 30 other people come out and say that's truth, and so we say, oh yeah, well, we see 30 news organizations quoting this, but you go back and it's just one article from one person, usually like an independent journalist. So basically, if you build single source arguments, you're going to break them down pretty quickly. It doesn't take much from an academic standpoint or for someone inside the community to go, this whole thing is crap. So if you want to go up against governments, if you want to go up against intellectuals outside of the own community, you have to have a good debate. There's a lot of good information there. Use it. When you build single source arguments, you're actually just doing yourself a disservice, because people aren't stupid, generally speaking. And I always think this is hilarious, because if this was an argument on the internet, if we actually just threw up these articles with this little of sourcing on the internet, the OP would be called a lot of foul names, and we'd be asking for the real sauce, right? So there'd be absolutely no way, if this was anything on an active internet post on Reddit or wherever else, that half these arguments, half these things would fly. But what ends up occurring is we want to believe it because it's something that we thought or wanted to believe anyways. We absolutely want to support information that supports our own biases. And the problem with that is you can literally say anything and make anything up on the internet, right? So just because you call it research and call yourself an independent journalist doesn't mean that that's what you're doing. And I think, again, that's something that we have to address in our own community, because if we want to take this privacy argument outside our community, we better be strong in doing it, because there's going to be people, intelligent people, tearing it down. But again, don't be smug. I'm up here, I'm a PhD student, I'm an adjunct lecturer, I talk about sourcing. Yeah, well, take a reality pill, pull back and allow every now and then, and don't be too smug about it. So I accept that even myself, that going outside of my own community, I have to be careful that I'm approaching things with my own, taking my own medicine, as it were. And then just in general, try not to be gullible when you're going through and believing these stories. Again, we use this constantly in the community. We'll source things out to people outside of the InfoSec, outside of the hacker, outside of the cybersecurity type communities. People will only be gullible for so long, and then they'll lose trust in you. They'll start looking at that community as just hype and just lying. So let's actually get more into the talk now. My rant's over. Let's talk about the actual argument. So the general argument people put forward is that you can have security or privacy. If you want to have more security, you must give up privacy. Well, we want to protect you. We want to do things for you, says the government, so you need to give up privacy so that we can do that. We've heard it over and over again from every elected leader on down of various nations, right? This, again, not focused on the US, the NSA. This is a widespread issue. So there was a very good debate that I went to last year by Sir David Oman. He was the former GCHQ director, and he was debating Google Privacy Advocate and a Guardian Privacy Advocate. I think it was actually two of the chiefs. So they were up there, high individuals in their own organization, and they started debating about which is better, surveillance or privacy. And coming into the talk, they did a poll of the people that were there, and everyone was all pro-privacy. This is a really good discussion point, but really, how can you really say surveillance is a good thing? So Sir David Oman ended up doing some awesome things in the debate from a debating standpoint, and went ahead and set a value in the debate to say, we must come to commonality that you must accept that we at least have, if I'm going to lose this here, this is what happens when TSA breaks your laptop and you have to get a loaner. That was nice. I had a TSA notice in my laptop on the way here that said, hey, we checked your baggage and my screen was cracked. So again, surveillance, awesome. I'm filing a claim, but go to this back again. Sorry for the issues. Anyway, so Sir David Oman was talking. He said, yep, we have to set at least some commonality for the debate. What I will say is that there's this line of surveillance and privacy, and what we have to come to a conclusion on is that it is a debate of how much are we willing to accept. And so, I don't know, this is just awesome. So we have to come to a conclusion, I can do it without slides. We have to come to the conclusion that we as a society must accept what value we're going to do. Maybe the joke at this point would be the NSA's hacking my computer, but in the intelligence community, it's probably not actually accurate. So Sir David Oman said, yep, let's set this value, and so that's actually what they did. The Google and the Guardian guy who were arguing. Awesome. Yeah, so does anyone have a laptop that they don't mind the intelligence community guy plugging in a USB to? I would hopefully maybe one of the staffers and not one of the audience. Nope, all right, well, I can do it without slides, we'll have fun. All right, so the argument tends to be, at what point are we gonna accept this value? And so the Google and Guardian guy actually said, sure, we'll go with that argument. Now the problem with that is you've set a theoretical maximum and you're arguing along the debater's piece there. So there was no way for them to ever win that debate. Sir David Oman won the debate. At the end, they had a poll, which is better, surveillance or privacy, and almost 79%, I think, left the debate switching their views, saying, yeah, thanks, saying, I believe that surveillance is better for society. So they lost value, lost value in a very pro-privacy setting just because he debated well and took a sourced academic approach. So I would actually say that that's probably not the right approach, this independent value of there's a theoretical maximum, and along that linear line, every bit more of surveillance gives you an output of privacy. So, here when you're ready, thanks so much. So with that debate, we generally don't ask ourselves, what do you mean by privacy and what do you mean by security? So what is it that we're actually giving up privacy for? What type of security? So what I've done in the slides is go through each aspect of what I would call security to have that debate. Do you define it as political security, as economic security, as physical security? What are you defining it as where you want to have this argument? So when you look at point by point, the first one being physical security, the first thing that comes to mind is the terrorist debate. You know, the terrorists are going to win, 9/11 happened, we got to have physical security, we got to have surveillance so that we can watch for all the terrorists so we can protect you. Well, the problem with that is that we don't have any case studies where that's really actually effective. So it's bad, it's sort of impossible to have a case study of what did we prevent, except for when the government comes forward and says, maybe one, maybe none, maybe we did, we're not sure, but we think we prevented some terrorism cases using this mass surveillance system. Well, if you can't even give one data point, whether it's classified or not, whatever it is, when you're having a good argument, you can't even come forward with one data point to say, yep, we've helped physical security with this mass surveillance system, well, then you are defeating your own argument. So to counter the point of physical security, I would say that we can come to the conclusion that mass surveillance and untargeted surveillance really isn't doing anything good. Hey, it's good enough, better than what I had, right?
If it's LibreOffice, you will see if it's...
No, it's great. Beggars can't be choosers.
Is this readable from your perspective?
It's probably better than just me ranting. It's a little slow, but anyway, so the next point that I got to after physical security was that of, yeah, thanks, was I believe that of economic security. So we've come out and said, okay, what about economic security if we break it down one further? Well, there's a very good case study to say, you know, China and others are absolutely looking at computer security. So computer security being, we've got to get all this data. To prevent the cyber threats, we've got to have all this data so we can go backwards in time. We have to suck it all up to do computer security. Without mass surveillance, we can't do computer security. And the transparency, it hurts the cause. If we reveal any of our data, our defense systems, if we talk about the exploits, we lose. We can't have any of this information out there. We have to have everything hidden away, and it has to be classified. Otherwise, we'll lose on the computer security side. So it's entirely hard to be a defender, and you can't do it, right? Well, what I would counter with that is data saturation on analysts is a real thing. So anybody that's been on keyboard, anybody that's been dealing with data, the last thing you want is big data. The last thing you want is mass amounts of data. You want specific targeted information to look through. If you're actually doing any bit of good computer security, you're looking for TCP modifications like Rodrigo was talking about, or in the morning speaker was talking about. You're looking for actual advanced attacks, actual advanced things. You want targeted, very specific sets of data to look at. The big data aspect isn't anything that helps an analyst. And we've seen time and time again throughout the community that open source and transparency really helps our systems. We've seen that open source defense systems really get community buy-in, people contribute to them and make them better than they ever were before. And we also see that exploits really don't become that much less effective when they're known about. So all these people that I usually go talk to on a cybersecurity perspective say, well, the nation states are using 0 days. Really? Because last time I checked, most of the exploits I saw from nation states were, reused code, wrapped in a new wrapper, and then it defeated AV, or some aspect of low-hanging fruit or phishing email that they were able to get in your computers. There is no aspect that we need mass surveillance to do computer security. I mean, forget about putting encryption down into your CPU. I would just, love to rule out SQL injections in the community. We're not doing the basic things. We haven't come to the stance where mass surveillance would really be useful for computer security. Okay, so economic security I touched about a little bit earlier. Prevent and mitigate espionage. We want to not have the Chinese steal the F-35 system. This is important to us. We need mass surveillance, and we need a lack of privacy so that we can go mitigate this. Economic and proprietary data are important, and I would actually concede that that's true. The problem is, again, even just from the NSA leaks, we've seen the community transition away from the technological community in the US. We've seen monetary value lost in economics and our economic foothold because of the lack of trust and the lack of transparency in the systems we use. The cloud-based providers have been hit the hardest because they get supposedly these secret orders that come to the agency and other people, and well, with these secret orders, we can't tell you anything about it, so users are saying, well, screw it, we'll go use someone else. I mean, even the most extreme example, when all the NSA leaks were coming out, I don't know how many people caught it, but there was a cloud-based provider in China that said, you can store your data here for free, and a lot of the community actually did that. Their numbers went through the roof that, well, it's China, at least it's not the US where the NSA is. And if we come to that point in the argument, I would say that we can go ahead and use this as a case study to say, against your privacy security argument, you're really not doing yourselves any favor if it's hit that low. So political security. If you're defining security and that security or privacy argument as political security, I would say there are no counterpoints. You should never be able to use any aspect of surveillance or privacy, keeping your own stuff anything but transparent in a political security scenario. Diplomacy, democracy, any aspect of free people has to be transparent. We've all come to these. I thought we worked this out hundreds of years ago. You can't use this aspect of mass surveillance because it's protecting your political security. It's exactly the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't even have counterpoints for this. This is just so inherently obvious in the debate that it's not acceptable to come forward on any other standpoint. I mean, we see Finfisher spying campaigns by governments all around the world. You can go read some of the Citizen Lab reports on what they've been doing. Government shouldn't be allowed to subvert privacy for the purpose of saying it's for political gain. It's just not acceptable. And yeah, US Congress approval rating is a little low. So that wasn't helped by the leaks. So cultural security, another point where this argument hasn't even been raised. It's always been about physical security or computer security. We generally don't see the government community coming out and saying, well, we want to have some sort of cultural security. In that point, generally speaking, those that come out and say, we want to keep the things they were, or we want to keep our culture, or we want to keep the foreigners out, it's generally not an accepted posture in society. It's usually limited in thinking, and it tends to be either racist or just closed-minded. Innovation such as openness and anonymity online is what made the internet the great thing that we had. It's what made technology come forward. It's what changed our culture, not only from a technological standpoint, but from an appreciation of the news and sources that we get. So even if the US government has the argument that we made the internet, we can take it back if we want, which was the argument that FX made last year at Troopers, what I would say is all the aspects of the internet that we actually use, with like www aspect and the HTTP and the host protocols that we use, all the inventors of that part of the internet has come out and said, well, we support privacy and we don't support how you're doing it. So the argument that the US government made the internet, we want it back, doesn't hold when I would say if you want to stop using the World Wide Web and stop using HTTP and you want to go back to DARPANet, then maybe we can have that argument. So my proposal is along the lines of security and privacy. Privacy is an integral aspect of security. We've seen this with open source technology. We've seen this with the cultural aspects. We've seen it with economic value. We've broken it down and said absolutely it needs to have a privacy component to everything we do if we want to increase security. I do think there has to be some sort of balance. So a lot of politicians have set it up and said there needs to be this balance between privacy and security, and that's okay. You know, early on, you can absolutely do that, and I'll present a model here in a second that's counter to the linear one that I showed or kind of, you know, screen crapped out on. But national secrets, intelligence missions, things of diplomacy, targeted intelligence, things like that, again, accepted biases, that's not part of the argument that I'm giving. That's the part where I think is okay. My issue is untargeted intelligence and mass surveillance and, you know, secret court orders and things like that. So on that, I think the model isn't linear. I think it's more likely, changes over time where, you know, sure, you can gain a level of security through some aspect of loss of privacy. Maybe it's CCTV, maybe it's checkpoints at an airport. Whatever it is that you want in a community, you could probably get to a certain level of higher security with less privacy if you really wanted to do so. And if you can't read between the lines there, quite literally, what I would say is the maximum return on surveillance for security has to be transparent and it has to be bought in by that community. So that's the asterisk on this kind of chart, is that if your community, if the US, if Germany, whoever says, we culturally accept these few things, and you've been transparent in how they're going to be done, what they're going to be done with, where's the data going to go, then yes, you can return some aspect of security from that. But as we try to reach those theoretical maximums, which Sir David Oman put in his debate so eloquently, what we actually get is a fall in security. We see restrictive domains and restrictive governments, you know, all the way back from the Algerian War of Independence up to the US involvement in Iraq. We see restrictions in surveillance states, Russia during the Sochi Olympics, Russia's surveillance system in general. We see those restrictive states actually return less security. We see more terrorism, we see more outbursts, we see more people getting involved in physical and damaging ways. But my proposal on who's right or who's wrong doesn't really matter. So I can come up here and say I've broken down security base by base, and I've talked about a model that's different than what's generally presented in the community, but it's really poorly structured ultimately. So I want to point out that it's as poorly structured as the debate against it, though. If you look from an academic standpoint into this debate, no one's doing a good job on saying what's right or what's wrong. The data points really aren't there. So what I would say in general, I firmly believe, you know, there's reasons the government does things and they believe they're doing right, but I think the way they're going about it is definitely the wrong way. But we don't have to debate. And I think the most important piece of this talk, right, because this probably is the most riveting talk ever, but the most important piece of this talk, from me being inside the intelligence community, me being a member that's seen different aspects and being a part of the hacker community and living in Germany, is I'm looking at it thinking out loud, we don't have to debate it. We aren't the ones with the ownership of the argument. The government or whoever's involved in this debate that wants to take something from us has to have some sort of proof. They are the ones with the proof, responsibility for proof. They're the ones that have to say, yes, we want to take privacy on X, Y, and Z things, and you are going to get this in return. Now, do you agree or not? So when we want to come back, this is the last piece of a rant for me, when we want to come back as a community and say, let's debate this, let's talk about why privacy is important, I think it's the exact wrong stop. I think it's the wrong approach. We should say, we don't have to debate it. You prove to us why this is important. And unfortunately, they haven't been doing that. They haven't been giving information. They haven't been telling us why we as citizens should do anything differently than what's going on now. And I think that's part of the problem. So the responsibility to prove is on them, not us. So I wanted to wrap this up relatively quickly because it was after the auction. And also, I'm hoping there's more debate than just questions and answers type stuff. But I would say we tend to be biased and believe stories, right? So that was the beginning point. And I would just ask the community that wants to go out and actually research, the community that wants to actually get involved in the debate, to accept their own biases as well as looking at those that are writing the stories and accept those biases and try to get to a more realistic truth. But come out and source your arguments and have a real discussion, because there's real discussion to be had. When you look at AT&T tapping, when you look at mass surveillance and untargeted surveillance, untargeted intelligence, there's enough information there to say, yeah, this is wrong. There's enough actual sources to say this is something we should look into without making these hype, FUD type stories. And then I would also say on this issue, again, we're not responsible for arguing it. They're responsible for arguing it to us, and then we can make a rational conclusion. But it's so backwards right now in the community how this is working. I just, again, want to say in the community that you're losing a lot of people inside the intelligence community. And let me not speak for them, but let me just give you my internal perspective. There's a lot of really good people in the government, even in the intelligence community, who are really passionate about privacy, who are really passionate about doing things right. But the hype, the FUD, the screw the NSA, screw these guys that are actually working, for a while there on the front page of even Reddit, and I go back to Reddit, but that's a large part of people in the community that get involved, front page articles about let's find their email addresses and leak them. Since they're spying on us, let's target their privacy. You lose people by doing that. All those people internal that were fighting for change, that wanted to do something good, you're losing them in the debate because you're targeting them. So I know I'm standing up here as the military guy sort of making some sort of plea for another community, but I would say if you really want to have a good debate, don't target the people, target how crappy the arguments are. Whether it's me drawing XY, graphs on PowerPoint, just back screen with black lines, the whole point of the presentation is it's actually kind of a crappy presentation, but it's as crappy as the one being given to us. Make a better argument, source your arguments, have a better conclusion, but don't forget about the people involved in them, because those are usually your biggest advocates. There's decisions I make on a daily basis inside my sphere of influence that impact this debate. And I do so really championing and advocating for privacy both externally and internally. There is some risk associated with me coming out at a hacker type conference and saying, I'm in the intelligence community, here's my name, here's my face, everything about me, and I really support privacy. There's people like that on the inside that want to do that. But if you force them to not do that, if you force them to thinking that they're the evil person, or you force them into a defensive corner, you're going to lose very important pieces of the debate. You're going to lose very important pieces and voices in the argument. So that's something that I've seen, something that's been really bugging me, is seeing that human aspect of it. Let's talk about the arguments. Let's talk about how crappily they're sourced. Let's talk about that and move to a better conclusion point. So again, I want to open up more to the discussions point, because I know maybe it's not usually active that the military guy gets up at the hacker conference. I'm hoping we can have some discussions here. So who would like to start it? Somebody? Otherwise, then I just got it. Thanks. Otherwise, I just definitely got us back on schedule. But go ahead.
I just want to add that, once you said it's unusual, at first guys turning up at hacker conferences.
Publicly, yeah.
If Troopers is a hackers conference.
Security research and with a bunch of hackers at it. Yeah.
That is a good description.
Yeah.
That said, do those discussions go on? You mentioned there's many good people. Yeah, absolutely. So you're the only one.
No, and that's what I think is. So I really wanted to use this as a stage.
Are you aware of any groups?
Yeah. So
that would have been my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So
does it take place in any institutional way?
Yeah. So it's one of the reasons I wanted to come to this stage. So again, I apologize for just a series of bad PowerPoint, but this is the kind of discussion I wanted to have that's important. There's absolutely groups throughout the intelligence community on the inside that have these discussions. There's online forums internally, there's things that we talk about, and there's movements internally that impact a lot of decisions. And it's actually organizationally, believe it or not, supported. And so I can't go into the details of every different organization and how they do things, but you'd be surprised with how much the management positions get people talking to them and saying, oh, this is a better choice, or this is a bad choice, or here's how we can do this better, which the community would support more of. And they go, okay, if you complete the mission, I really don't care. It's not ever that they were a malice in the first place. It's not that they're trying to be malicious. It's sometimes people are trying to take on something that they're not necessarily technically proficient with and screw up. But when the internal organization says, hey, how do we do it differently? And they're listening to the community objectives, community aspects, which has been extremely important. So a lot of the debate, again, about the EFF has been extremely important into the internal, seeing that. So outside of your own community, you tend to not understand it. Outside of the internal community of the intelligence agencies, they probably don't understand so often the hacking and security conferences. Those points are very helpful to people. Yeah?
You weren't here yesterday for that
No, I was a little bit sick.
panel on the community and ethics, but the point of that was first, very few attendees, and second, we probably don't have an idea of what our community is, and there's probably not one, so it's kind of hard to start a debate. So, what's your take on that, being part of two of those communities in brackets? How would you go about starting that debate? I mean, apart from what you're obviously doing, you're trying that, but what do you expect of the hacker community?
Yeah, absolutely. So FX is the first one that I talked to when he brings up what hacker community. Like, you talking about the B forums, you talking about B sides, you talking about CCC, what is it? So yeah, absolutely, bracket and air quotes. What I've seen in any community from my involvement, more on the technical side, it doesn't get done unless you do it yourself, and then people jump on. So I don't know how long Sergey and Travis and others have been really focusing on, hey, let's talk about this bus architecture and where it's insecure, and let's focus on the protocols and the weird machines. Generally speaking, it has to be you speaking out and you saying something intellectual, saying something academically sourced or whatever it might be that fits your values, and then people jump onto it. I mean, I've met plenty of people that have given me information to take back, that have made me better educated, that have made me a better privacy advocate internally just by standing up the first time that I spoke at Troopers or the first time that I went out to these conferences. So I would say absolutely just stand up and speak, stand up and make your opinion known, get feedback on it. The internet community is the first one to rip you apart when you're wrong, and it's actually really good feedback usually. It's just right now it's been this self-licking ice cream cone that it sort of supported itself because, you know, we all care about privacy. Let me say Snowden, you know, the brief this morning talked about, let me say Snowden, Greenwald and a couple different pieces and NSA leakers, and all of a sudden I'm a keynote speaker. You know, all of a sudden I've got a presentation where I normally wouldn't have anything technical to present at a conference, but I've said privacy is good, therefore I'm a speaker now. Don't do it that way. Try to have a unique perspective to bring, and then when you do that, people will sort of come to you. Like, even if you lose 90% of the audience, there's going to be that 10% that talks to you and gives you good takeaways, and usually can support that aspect. So in that hacker community, how do you instruct that? How do you get better? I think we have very good conference venues and places set up to have that discussion, have those breaks and the coffee breaks or whatever, talk about it, and then you go out each to your sphere of influence, whatever it is, and you make that aspect a little bit better. Hopefully that answers enough your question. Yeah.
Much of the stuff I read and heard during the NSA scandal reminded me of organizations going amok, organization losing the target and doing some stuff that's not really helpful. Everybody who's been working for a large corporation, for a real large corporation, knows this from the economic side, not only the military. You are talking, so this matches, you're talking about the people inside the intelligence community, and this kind of matches my point of view there. But from my experience in the economic sector, the people don't matter. The people don't really change the organizations. So are you positive? Are you?
Yep. So that's a really good question, and what I would say I'm hopeful about is there's a difference in just standing up and saying, hey, I oppose this and this is important. And the other counterpoint, which actually is way more effective, is saying, you know what, I oppose this and that's important, but forget that. What do you care about organizationally? I can help you get there better. If you talk about reducing costs in an economic situation, they're usually going to take your choice, right? If you talk about a better product, a better end product, they're going to focus more on you, regardless of if they care about your opinion. large corporations and large governments and large organizations don't have ethics and morality because there's so many different pieces of the puzzle. They're not morally they're not immoral, they're not moral. They're sort of just away from that argument. They move in their own interest. So I would say absolutely, a lot of people fail in that. They stand up and say, this is important, why won't you listen to me? Put it back in their own terms. So the trick to this presentation is I'm glad that we have this audience and I appreciate you coming, but it's on YouTube, it's recorded. There's gonna be plenty of people in the intelligence community reading my own video here. I'm more speaking to them in this presentation about standing up internally and saying, hey, something's important to me, but more importantly, I can put it in your language. Mass surveillance is actually ineffective for your mission. Let me tell you a better way to do it. That gets things changed. If you reach the conclusion, if you reach the objective that your organization wants to come to anyways, if you do it a different way that now supports your ideas, supports that community objective, they don't care. It's not like the big NSA, which I don't even know who that would be, like who wakes up and says, I am the NSA today. They don't really care about the direction as long as it's moving them toward their objectives. So try to guide the objectives in the direction that is good, that we can agree on. So more shots, more questions? Yeah, sir.
One question. You talked about the NSA, you talked about basically government coming in and taking information. What about companies?
Yeah, so this is...
There's lots of privacy in the whole world.
Yeah. I think we're in a better position in the companies aspect, and maybe it's because I'm in the government and I think the commercial sector still looks nice, and then those in the commercial sector tell me it's even worse. Maybe there's a debate there. But I think we're better off because of some of the pieces being transparent, even if sometimes it's in these long user agreements that end up uncovering some aspect that no one reads. There's someone that does that and gives a talk on it, or someone that comes out and says, hey, this is wrong. So there's benefit in the commercial sector and some of it being public, but quite a bit of it's not. I've had conversations that I'm almost, even in standing up and saying all this, there's some conversations I'm almost timid to approach here, and the dealings of corporations and how they go about things that makes it very, very, in my opinion, immoral. When you see in news leaks or arguments or whatever where this poor corporation was being taken advantage of by a certain organization, sometimes that was a conversation not necessarily started like we imagine. News media organizations, people with financials, people with stocks, very much take a biased approach, and the government isn't going to come back out and contradict it. The NSA never comes back out and has any sort of reasoned argument against what's said, so you can almost say anything. So on that corporation side, there's a lot of what I would say shadier dealings going on than people realize, and it's usually the same people that are crying victim that are actually supporting the objectives or actually initiating the conversations. Now, that's not for any organization in particular. I'm not talking about the NSA here. I'm just saying in general, I would view that there is some biases to the story being presented and realize that in that office when the decisions were being made was probably multiple points of perspective going on. So just accept analysis of competing hypotheses, right? Not everything is in black and white as we tend to think it is. How do you do something about it? Those people in those corporations are gonna have to do something. What I thought was incredibly the wrong approach, and even though I don't have any personal objection to Julian Assange, I don't have any personal objection to Greenwald or any of these people because I don't know them. They could be outstanding individuals. Maybe I'd love to sit down and have a beer with them. I don't know. Haven't met them. Can't say that they're traitors or whatever. I wasn't involved in it. What I will say that I thought was really the wrong approach is this year at CCC, I was there in the audience. It was nice, sort of awkward this year being the intelligence community guy sitting there saying I'm a hacker. But what I would say about his approach this year was you should go inside these organizations, grab the football, and take it out. You should absolutely say, hey, go in and get their secrets and show it. And you have the sysadmins unite. So the problem with that is you're asking people to fall on the sword for your cause. You're asking them to do it in a very damaging way, a way that they can go to jail or lose their financial stability or whatever. So I think it's just inappropriate in general. But the real problem is you put these organizations that might have wanted to have some sort of change, that might have wanted to do something on the defensive. Now they're worried about leakers inside. Now they're setting up different programs because, oh God, Julian Assange has called the hackers together. And now there's the sysadmins unite, and they're all coming for us. There's paranoia that gets involved. So there has to be a logical way to approach this in that we're not doing hype, we're not doing FUD, we're not asking people to unite as an organization and go in and infiltrate the spy agencies, but instead we're just saying from a community perspective, do everything in a moral, ethical way where we can actually have a good discussion and bring as much out through the processes as possible to have a transparent discussion. I think the government really owes us one on that one. Even as a military member, in a corporation, you can sort of choose not to use that product. Military, you can't choose not to use that government, unless maybe you're an African state where it happens. I would say that they really owe it to us. They really owe more transparency. And I know we've been arguing about that forever, but there's a way to go about that and show that rather than just crying foul. Hope that kind of hits on it enough. Any more discussions, questions? Like I said, hopefully a unique opportunity to ask. Yeah.
Thanks for your really awesome insights. Thank you very much. There's one thing I'm missing in your presentation.
Yeah, here comes the butt.
The token code.
The what?
Token code.
The token, yeah. I didn't have any unicorns or goats or anything like that, so they're not up there. I actually do technical research. I actually do technical things usually. This year I wanted to deep dive into ICS protocols and all that, but I don't have any tokens to give you to hack your badge. So let me take a time out, and or maybe you can do it in the powers of 2 to the hex value, of whatever it might be, like you're doing the auction. So part of this is actually fully my fault and not the conferences. I missed yesterday because I was sick. I flew in through Lufthansa from another conference, even though I live here in Germany. And it wasn't Lufthansa's food, but somebody gave me some food poisoning along the way. And so I wasn't able to link up with them and get the token to put up on the slides. I know, excuses. So now not only am I the intelligence community guy at the conference, but now I'm the guy that didn't give you the token. So this is wonderful. Yeah, so this is a freebie. Just for sitting through this really crappy PowerPoint, you get a free token. So, like I said, all my presentations usually aren't this bad. It's just the fact that I just wanted it more to be I'm getting up and saying something versus the PowerPoint. There's real value in talking to the people and getting the people out, people that have the experience that you want, and talking to them instead of vilifying them. And hopefully more people, whatever happens to me after work, right? Well, more people that I know will watch videos like this and want to stand up and say something in an ethically way. I'm not talking about whistleblowing stuff. You know, there's processes. It's hard to explain to people, but there's actually really good processes inside for bringing up information. And I know people have countered that argument, but I've seen those internally and I've seen them work. I've seen legal counsels and everything inside the intelligence communities where I said I have a problem with something and they worked through it. But it's usually not as fast as you want because, as we talked about with any corporation or large organization, it doesn't move at hacker speed. And sometimes that bothers people and they'll go, well, I'll just whistleblow if you don't respond to me tomorrow. That's not how it works. So hopefully more people in the organizations will give talks about their perspective and try to get things done internally. So anything else besides tokens? Any other questions besides classified stuff? Yeah. So.
One final point, maybe
Yeah.
about being paranoid. I was surprised by this NSA scandal or all the Snowden papers because every technical approach was well known before.
Oh yeah.
The only difference was that the default expectation from the intelligence service was amazing. The default approach is everyone outside the country, means every other nation, every other individual living in another nation is by default an enemy. Maybe our own population, our own citizens are also enemies. Maybe our own workers, employees are also enemies. It's a highly paranoid approach.
Yeah.
And from my own experience, I know that being paranoid has a highly self-destructive element inside.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, it should worry you as a worker in some sort of intelligent government organization and as a US citizen more than me.
Oh yeah. Oh, it bothers me. It does. So here's the truth of the fact is I work on a national level team doing some really cool things that I see some amazing results out of that do really good work. And then I see all this debate and all this really crap way to approach things, tear apart my team, gets members out of the community, becomes self-destructive. I lose talented analysts. Like we can't keep them at work because they're like, well, you know, I'm tired of being vilified on the way home from work, whatever it is. We lose good parts of the mission, and then what replaces those good parts? All of that hype and crap we were trying to fight against fills that void. And so that highly paranoid product gets even worse because we probably were approaching it wrong in the first place. What I would say though about that same preface to the argument is that's not necessarily fact on the way that things happen with the everyone's an enemy approach. There's I'm not in the NSA, can't speak for the NSA, right? I don't know. There's a lot of these cool programs that I've heard about that I'm like, oh really, do we have that? Like does the government have that? That's interesting. What I would say to that is some of the data is being read wrong. like you can post up a PowerPoint slide and 10 people can get a different answer from it. You can post documents and people get a different answer from it. And what I would even say is sometimes not the most talented people in your organization are the ones writing the PowerPoints. So there's an issue with you're giving PowerPoints to management and not your technical people, right? You might have someone saying, hey, here's a cool tool, and what do? They pass you the code. But if you want to display it to management, you break it down, dumb it down, say what it does in a hypothetical, and put it on a PowerPoint slide. And then PowerPoints get leaked. Great. So now we look really incompetent too. So your point about the technical information, it's always funny to me that I could absolutely today leak a top secret no foreign slide that says there's this program out there, you can put it on a network, it'll capture off data, it'll pull out SSL, it'll pull out passwords and images, you can even re-sessionize the data, and it affects every known network out there, and it's indiscriminate. And then people would be like, yeah, it's called Wireshark, you can go download it. But everyone would freak out, and they'd be like, oh my God, the NSA is developing this industry-scale malware. There's this sort of non-technical approach in the community to really not understanding the technology that's been present for years. So yeah, I would say there's a huge issue with that as well. But to your point of paranoia breaking down a community, absolutely. And so going back to the physical security aspect, 9/11 was horrible for the intelligence community. Day after day after day getting blamed for not catching a horrible tragedy, for not catching it, for not seeing it, for not knowing it. Why didn't you? Why didn't you share? Why didn't you do this? And you just self-destruct internally without going outside your own community. You just self-destruct internally. How do we not catch it? Okay, what do we do next? Okay, and this sort of paranoia absolutely takes over. And I wouldn't say every analyst feels that, but I think organizationally we're seeing the results of that. And as slow corporations move, you're still seeing the impacts of 9/11 12 years, 13 years later, because that's how long they take to move through an organization that large. So there's definitely value and truth in what you're saying. But there's a lot of us that realize that are trying to change things. And again, that goes through the vilifying the personnel aspect. It's a slow-moving beast. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not trying to say you should trust in the government and the agency and everyone else. That's not
I just want to
it.
jump in and say there's a very opposite of paranoia. That is called trust.
Yeah. Yes. I agree.
I mean, trust has to be, say, placed where trustworthy. Still, once you enable the capacity to trust, you hopefully get rid of the paranoia. I mean, from a very personal perspective, if there was anything to blame, like the Bush administration in the years after 9/11 fall, they destroyed the climate of trust, which until then has been the fuel of the American society. I mean, in the U.S., however your personal stance towards the U.S. might be, this country, they have invented a lot of good things, and they have a very special society in contrast to the German one, and one that has so far been, from my outsider perspective, been built on trust. And destroying this by whatever types of surveillance and all this, this is really the fundamentals of this.
Tarnish their brand.
Yeah.
That said,